Hi, I'm Jeff Strong, and today I'd like to talk to you about one of the rhythms I present in my book, Different Drummer. This rhythm's in 21/16 time, which is very different than a typical music, which would be in 4/4 time. Now, 4/4 time means there's 4 beats in the measure and a quarter note gets 1 beat. 21/16 times means there's 21 beats in the measure and a 16th note gets a beat. Let me play this rhythm for you a little bit and kind of get a feel for it, and then I'll dissect it and talk about where it came from. So this rhythm is in 21/16. So that rhythm kind of grooves, you get into a feel for it, but if you were to count it out, it's very hard to count. Just because counting to 21 or trying to divide it into a pattern that would be easier to count than counting all the way up is kind of difficult. So let me talk about where this came from. Just to give you an idea, this 21/16 rhythm is something that I discovered seems to help with a hand flapping motion, a motion like this, that I saw in a lot of people with autism. The way I came about this rhythm was to start with a core rhythm that was really basic and then kind of morph it and watch the behavior. And when I started seeing a pattern in the way behavior changed, I knew I was on to the right rhythms. And then it was just a matter of refining it over time. This 21/16 really was a long evolution to get to. So I'm just going to break it down into a couple pieces that kind of give you an idea of the progression. First of all, I'm going to play for you a rhythm that my teacher taught me in 4/4 time. This is based upon a lot of rhythms that we were playing in different ceremonies and what he was doing playing one-on-one with people. So that rhythm sounds like this. So this rhythm is in 4/4. It really breaks down pretty simply. You've got a bass tone on the first beat of 1. Then you've got a open tone on the of 1 and 2. And then you've got a slap tone on the of 2. And then a bass tone again on the end of 3. And a slap tone on the 4. And so it's kind of got a real nice kind of feel to it. It's a little syncopated, but it's also fairly straightforward. Something you can get a real good grasp of. When I started playing it, I thought that was cool, but I tend to play more unusual rhythms. I like to mix it up because I have a hard time with anything that's too repetitive or too straightforward. And a lot of that's the ADD, and part of that is also just because I like odd syncopated rhythms. So what I did with this traditional rhythm is I moved the bass drum, the second bass drum beat, from the and of 3 to the of 3. And all it did was just give it a little bit more of a syncopation. Kind of kept that lope that was happening through the 2 and the 3 and into the 4. So I'll play the core rhythm that Lloyd taught me. And then I'll pause for a half second and then I'll play the rhythm the way I do it. And you can see the difference. It's a subtle change in the way the orchestration is, but it really feels very different. So here's the original. And this is the way I changed it. So just moving that bass drum over 1/16 of a note really changes the way it moves along. Now this is a cool rhythm to use, but it really didn't do anything as far as behavior in a listener went. It was just a little too repetitive, too straightforward. It's just 4 beats long. So I kind of morphed it a little bit. I added things, I changed things around, and the core rhythm that I ended up with that seemed to help with this hand flapping motion just basically added 5 beats to the end of this. And so we went from 16/16 to 21/16. And so I'm going to play the 16/16, the 4/4 rhythm, just a variation on what Lloyd taught me. And for a little bit I'll stop, and then I'll jump in and play the 21/16 by adding those 5 extra beats. And basically what I'm doing is I'm repeating the 5 last beats of the 4/4 measure. So you'll probably be able to hear the repetition there. So I'll start with the 4/4 and then move into 21/16. So just adding those extra 5 beats really kind of changed the feel of it. Now it's something you really can't count. It's something that takes a little while to really understand. And one of the keys of the REI rhythms, aside from their specificity, that is this 2116 really working specifically with the hand flapping motion, for instance, is the idea that the brain becomes engaged by the unpredictability, by the novelty of the rhythm. And so if I can play a rhythm that the brain can't really figure out, that we can't categorize or associate with regular music, the brain will start to engage and stay engaged trying to decipher it. And so every rhythm that I use tends to be unusual enough that you can't really get a feel for it. You can't count it out. After a while, it just kind of moves along, but it does have its own kind of comfort by listening to it, because there is a pattern there. And as long as there's a pattern, we can settle in. So in order to change this up, because if I played this particular rhythm, even in 2116 long enough, the brain will decipher it and shut down, and it will become less stimulating for the listener. And so what I'll do generally is I'll add some variations, or I'll change the orchestration of the rhythm. One of the key variations that I tend to use is a 3-beat pattern called a forte. And it's based upon a Swiss rudiment I learned years ago when I was in school. And it's 4 strokes in a 3-beat pattern, and it goes like this. And so by just putting that in the middle of or towards the end of this 2116 rhythm, kind of adds a nice little turnaround to it. The one disadvantage with just using the forte as it is it's only 3 beats long, which turns a 2116 rhythm into 2416. And 2416 is easily divided into groups of 4. And so it could almost be considered a 6/4 measure. And that becomes too repetitive, too easy to kind of decipher. So what I do is I added 3 more beats onto this forte to put it into 6, and that brings the rhythm back up to 2716, which is then an odd enough rhythm that the brain again has a hard time really getting an understanding of where it's going next. And that rhythm, that forte with 3 extra beats, would sound like this. And so that turnaround is something I use quite a bit. And so here I'll play the 2116 rhythm, and then every 4th time through I will put in this 6-beat forte variation. You can see how that turns around. It just kind of adds a nice little kind of pattern to it. So that was 2 times through the pattern, 8-bar phrase. And when I construct rhythms and I play for people, I try to put it in musical terms. So a 4-bar phrase is really typical for music, and that creates a familiarity that when you have a pattern kind of growing that way, it becomes something that feels somewhat musical, even if you can't count the rhythm, and if you can't really understand what the particular accent patterns coming along are going to be. That little bit of familiarity puts it in a musical context, which can be really helpful. Now, if I were just going to do that, repetitive 4-bar patterns like this with the forte variation at the end, it really wouldn't have the impact it needs to have. It really needs to vary a lot more than that. So to give you an example, I'll play this 2116 rhythm, and I'll improvise on it a bit, and just kind of use the forte variation once in a while. I'll change the orchestration of the 2116 rhythm, and we'll just see how it goes and see how it feels after a little while. So just settle in and just get a feel for what this sounds like, and see how it changes and morphs and keeps you engaged. So that's a 21-16 rhythm, and it's kind of cool.